And I got it because I was timing it once. I was working on a TV show, and the actor, John McGinley, was going to a Springsteen concert. So, and I mean, we wanted to rap to get it done in time. So we kind of milked it. And I had someone call me right when they called the rap. The phone went off. And he said, "It's for you." All right, everything rolling. I think Lindsay's like hanging out, but I think she's laying down because of her.
Okay, here.
Oh, there you go. Oh, hi. I want to be able to see you. All right, so we can begin. So let's just all settle into our seats and just close your eyes for a second. And traditionally in a Tibetan practice, we'll do dedication and prayers of setting our motivation and say that in Tibetan. And because of like this book and what this class is about, and I think what Lama Marut was trying to reach a really global audience, I think we'll do a global dedication in our own language and just let the day and the heat and the bustling around kind of fade away from us now, and let that all, like everything's melting in the heat, let that melt, and where your mind was all day, and just try to come into this beautiful, very special place, very sacred place here at Wisdom's Heart, where so many wonderful people have come to both teach and be taught and help each other, and be really grateful that we can gather again here. I know I'm so grateful that I can be here to talk tonight. And I just want to think about all of the happiness that has been generated in a place like this and by people like you. And I think that obviously the theme of this book is about the goal of happiness. So if you can think of anyone who might not be happy right now, people in the world who might be struggling, you might be struggling, you count two. Let's just dedicate that any goodness that we can generate from this talk, anything we can learn to help ourselves, will be a help to other people, ultimately. And so let's hope that we can then give them all the help they need by helping ourselves tonight. So that we can leave here a little happier than we came in, which will make us better fit and able to help others. Okay. So thanks for coming on a really toasty summer day. But it's pretty nice in here, actually. I know a lot of you, but Rick Blue is my name, and I'm a resident of Cape Ann most of the time, hopefully more of the time, and I bounce back in between the suburbs of Los Angeles and here, where we also run the summer retreat. And so, and I'm also a student of Lama Marut's, and that's what this class is about. One of his becoming a dinosaur student a little bit, but when he started originally teaching the ACI curriculum, when he was still a college professor in Los Angeles, we would gather at his house very informally, like we're doing here in a way. He didn't have a center, but the same spirit, and we would study with him in small groups. And of course, his trajectory has been big and spacious, and he studied for so long and brought so much to bear on what he studied. And so a year ago, it seemed only a year ago was the book tour, right? He distilled the ideas into a book called The Spiritual Renegade's Guide to the Good Life, and he made it very accessible. So here's a guy with big brain space. He's studied so many different texts in terms of comparative religion, particularly Eastern but he's a scholar of ancient languages. But what he didn't write was like an inaccessible academic tome. He tried to write a book that anybody could pick up and put into play. So more than a book that sits on the shelf and is very kind of hard to access or show off, it's just the opposite. It's really a manual. You know, it's like a motorcycle on it. He's a bike rider, and maybe that's a little bit of the Renegade motif. But I like it too because it's, you know, it's kind of like looks like a motorcycle, like a manual for how to ride somewhere. And so that's what the book is. And so when one of the things when they said, "Would you like to teach at the center?" I was going to do something that was more about ritual and more specific to a Buddhist practice. And I said, "No, I want to talk about the book a little bit." So they were very kind, the curriculum committee here, to say, "Sure, that's a good idea, and let's do it." And I know that there's some people who are going to go more deeply into this possibly in the fall. So don't let this not have you come back as they dig deeper, because it's hard to do a survey of this. There's two things. So and I talked to them about it. They said, no, we'll both do it, and we'll do a summer session, and then there'll probably be a fall session of this. So there's that. Okay. Obviously, I kind of made this talk a little bit about what I call the pillars of a daily practice, to try to kind of frame out a house in these talks about what are some of the support systems that you would build this beautiful house on. And then, of course, at the very end, he has like, here's some things you can do every day. We can talk about those in 10 minutes. So, but it takes a while to talk about the philosophy of why you would do those things. Otherwise, it's just a list. It's not informed by a worldview. Okay? So here we go. And if anyone has a question or wants to, can jump in, we can do that too. What is a practice anyway? Because we're going to talk about, it's going to teach you to do a practice, or the pillars of a daily practice, and we throw the word around a lot. Obviously it means repetition, a practice, or it means trying to get better at something, therefore you would practice it. It also means, I think, a way you go through your life, like a doctor is a practice. It also means a vocation or an avocation. But it's not just enough, like I said, to give you a list of things to do every day. Rather, you need to know why you're doing it. And are you doing it for a reason that you relate to? Because I found that the biggest sticking point for a lot of us is we get inured to classes even. We go to a lot of classes, or we go to a lot of talks, or we grab a lot of books off the shelf, or the self-help shelf, or wherever, or spiritual books, and we just kind of read them or put them away, or we go to a talk and say, that was fun, that was interesting. You flip on the tube, get out of, for me, get a little frozen yogurt, and, that was a nice evening. We got to do better than that, see? So I think in a book like this, you have to find what's relevant, but you have to put it into play. Because there's a lot of good medicine in here, but like a lot of it, if we just collect the medicines and put them on the shelf and kind of like the idea of having medicine, and it makes us look good to others, we have all this cool stuff, or we can spout interesting things and, list this and list that, we're not putting it into play. So the steps themselves are not meaningful unless they're grounded in a worldview. There needs to be a context and a foundation, and I think this book does that really well. So since these classes are about a daily practice based on Lama Marud's book, we'll check into what his worldview is maybe, and what it means to be a spiritual renegade. It's kind of a, spiritual renegade. So based on that idea, we'll find out what that is. So what is a spiritual renegade anyway, First of all, I think a renegade is someone who's probably a little iconoclastic, or is not going with the flow. So I think, in my mind, I think that person always begins with a question: how's it going? What's going on? Is this working? Why are we doing this? And are you happy? Usually the answer I find is, and sometimes people say, yeah, I am. A lot of times you get, not so-so, okay, not so well, up and down. Or sometimes the eyes go down and say, it's really hard. And I think that's what really drives people to open a book like this. because we get too complacent if things are a little too easy and going well, we can go to sleep. It's usually, it's a challenge or pain or being stuck that drives us to get these answers. So what usually draws us to examining this practice is I think that we have an itch. I can't remember, Lindsay, the word that Pema Chodron used. I think it's shenpa. The itch that we're always trying to scratch. And I think any spiritual journey begins with a question, have you had enough? And I think that's the question Lama Marut poses with this. Are you sick of constantly putting a Band-Aid on your problems? And it's just not really healing. So in the preface, here's what Lama Marut says. He says, it's a book for people who wish to be duped no longer. So he throws it right out there, but who originally want to be happy and who figured out that the usual methods on offer in the modern world don't work. It's a guide for those who are tired of trying to become well-adjusted to a perverse society and are willing, even eager to deviate from the norm. So there's the Renegade part. I know I found this really cool magnet that I have on my office at home, and it's from a great spiritual teacher, J. Krishnamurti. And here's the quote on it. It is no measure of health to be well-adjusted to a profoundly sick society. So, and I think that's what he's pointing out, is we're very pleased that we're adjusting to something that's out of adjustment. And it's being sold to us as the way to get adjusted. So Renegade says, I don't want to be, and Mr. Krishnamurti is saying, I don't want, this isn't the standard that I want to be measured by, or that any person should be. So this is about renunciation, that word, renunciation. The word that we always think immediately, because we want to hold on to what we like and not give up what we want, is like, someone wants something from me. I have to give something up, I have to lose something, So immediately our world gets constricted when we think of that. But I think he's thinking about something else. He's talking about renunciation as a means to give up all the temporary measures that we've been using. Okay? So far, I think we're all pretty good with this. We're trying to cut a deal with that profoundly sick society. We're always trying to rig a winning scenario, like we're playing chess or backgammon, and we're trying to get the gambit. We're trying to figure out how to win, and we roll the dice. We try it. We roll the dice. We try it. We roll the dice, and finally we get exhausted from projecting an answer that isn't there in the world as we're perceiving it. And so I think part of this book too is to break you down and get you tired and give up and try something else. And also, trying to cut a deal or trying to buy into, what Madison Avenue is serving up to us. I mean, anyone who knows Lama Marut knows that he spends a lot of time going toe-to-toe with what he calls the capitalist consumer machine, what they're trying to sell us. So I say this book is for those who are smart enough to discern what will really be effective and what won't, and do care about themselves and others enough to seriously commit to creating a saner, healthier way of life. And to know that in an insane world, the same person might very well appear disordered. So that's the Renegade part too, is I think you've got to be willing at some point to say, I really don't care how I look. I really don't care if it seems weird. I'm just going to do this now, and I'm going to do it with great faith. Because I know that by doing so, and by saying I don't care doesn't mean I don't care about other people. But I'm not going to worry about the surface appearance, because I know that if I'm doing this with a great deal of fidelity, that people will be helped by it. So nothing bad can come from that, right? But you're not going to look like everybody else, because everyone else is trying to fit into the picture that we're given and the norm that Madison Avenue says. I mean, look at commercials. I mean, look at how people are put in pigeonholes, women especially. Women's clothes, how they should look, what their body type should be like, what your friends should be like, how you're supposed to be laughing, in the beer commercials where they're all having this outrageously good time and they walk in the room, and they all are kind of wearing the same thing. It's like a really bizarre. It's bizarre when you watch it. It's like, do a field trip. Turn on the TV for a while. It's insane. And the same thing for men. And sports cultures and everything else. It's pretty perverse. So Lama Marut wants to push us to the point where we ask ourselves, what is the point? I want to get to the point where I want to know what are we supposed to be doing here? You know, I mean, all of us are painfully aware that we only have a certain amount of time in the way that we're constructed and manifested in this world. So what do we want to do with it? And you know, we'll talk about tragedy, and we'll talk about sometimes how we can revise that and say it's the most powerful teachings we can get too. Because luckily there are people who teach us how to make those transitions, and I think many people here have experienced that personally in the last few weeks here in Cape Ann, where people have been gracious enough to take what we would call a tragedy, or the thing that society wants to hide and not look at, the fact that we come and go, and say, I'm going to help teach all of you now how to do this in a beautiful way, you know, and in a way that will change every life of everyone that I touched as I did, right? So they can help other people. So he starts the book out by saying, what is the point? And you know, with all of the education and all of the you know, deep philosophical studies at the highest university levels, as a PhD, here's what he comes up with. It's to be happy. So he comes up with, on the surface, where people say, well, that's silly. That's not very ambitious, right? But he did a lot of thinking about this. He says that's it. He says there's no reason no reason other than that for your existence. That is why you're here. It's your mission. He says, should you decide to accept it. You know, so he goes mission impossible. It's, you know, should you decide to accept it? And it is a choice, isn't it? It isn't a given, and it's not something that we're seeming that we're in touch with the second we're born. In fact, it seems like when we're born, we seem to have carried with us the propensity to get further away from what a child knows naturally, to how to play and be in the field of play and to be happy and to not be judgmental and to not feel compelled to act all the time either. So, you know, a Buddhist would say we have the seeds that we start to, in a misdirected way, like and dislike things, and that's where the trouble starts. Okay. So, so as soon as he says the happy thing, the book, he interjects, disappointed? So are you bummed? Were you hoping for something more complicated, more onerous, he said, more burdensome? By the way, in a class like this, obviously, I'm not like pulling out a lot of different texts. I'm plagiarizing. We're going through the book, so I'm quoting him all the time. So you know, and anything I get wrong in an interpretation of the quote is my fault. Okay. So it's fun. It's fun to be able to just plagiarize your teacher, and we do anyway. I think by trying to be an example to all the great teachers that we've had, and I'm not saying I'm one of them, but I'm saying we've had them, and I think that sometimes flattery is a good offering to say, not do you want to be a robot, but I really want to put these things into play. So that's what I think the book does too. Okay. So he says, you know, probably thinking there's more serious work to be done than that. You know, because, and then, you know the rant, serious people, you know, sophisticates know better, right? Like, you know, because when you go to a cocktail party with the intelligentsia, you damn well better be sitting home, or you won't be taken seriously at all, right? And you better be, you know, a little depressed. If you want to be hip, you know, come on, and you know, don't be too satisfied, and be suspicious of everything, right? This is the hip way to be, right? Otherwise, I mean, you know, if you come in with the good news, people say, oh, get your head out of the sand. So he's saying the world is upside down, folks, you know, and it's as simple as wanting to be happy. And there's a trickle down to this in our society, to be a victim, to be misunderstood. You know, the message is, you know, don't go and ask me to forget my pain, he says, and become a happy green idiot. You know, forget about that, you know. And we'll talk about it later in the chapter about, because, you know, we want to hold on to our pain. It's like a sweatshirt message. I'm bummed, I'm dark, I'm edgy, you know, and we wear them, and then we want to try to bump into other people that will help us reinforce those ideas. You know, because if you say I'm happy, people think, well, you're not a very deep thinker, are you? So here's an incredibly deep thinker who's highly trained and says, the hell with that idea. You know, try this. If you're a really tough guy or girl, try this on for size, because it's not for wimps, actually. To actually follow through on it is not a fluffy enterprise, okay? So he finds this irony in that these people who are invested in unhappiness as a meaningful, deeper, and more authentic way of life are just trying to be happy too. See, that's their MO. They're trying to be happy by being unhappy. So you have to think about it. But those two things aren't connected, he says. And no less than planting an acorn to get an apple tree will a stance of habitual unease and unhappiness bring you to a resultant happiness. I think we all agree on that too, right? It doesn't make any sense. Adopting such a stance of unhappiness perhaps entails the unconscious belief that what we're unhappy about will change because we're unhappy about it, right? And then we'll be happy, right? But this can't work. He says, although it's crucial in your quest for happiness to recognize initially and acknowledge suffering, acknowledge that we're in trouble. You know, suffering, he said, needn't be said, is not happiness and will not bring it about, though. Right? So then he says, so even though we're confused about this, we're actually hardwired for happiness, though. As human beings, happiness is the drive to be happy is an innate drive that informs everything we do. See, my phone is here. This is a really big moment here. It's so funny because I have no idea where it is. I'm just going to keep going because you know what this actually is? This is the alarm I put in that tells me to do my book. But I'm going to actually snooze it because, and then I promise you I'm going to do it either during the break or afterwards. Okay, so we were talking about being hardwired for happiness. You know, he says the fact is that our desire to be happy is not something outside us or optional. You know, we're totally hooked up for it, and it motivates every action we do during the day. We're all driven from the time we wake up in the morning until the time we go to sleep at night by this urge to do two things: to avoid pain and obtain things and experiences and people and places that will make us happy. That's all we're doing all day long. So there is, you might say, he said, a kind of will to happiness that underlies all our efforts. Our desire for food, sex, friends, family, money, things, professional acknowledgement and fulfillment, and entertainment and amusement. He says, Ron Wood says in the book, the very motion of our lives is to move us towards happiness. So this is what we want by nature. We know the Dalai Lama always says it, right? He says we all just want to be happy and avoid pain. So he says we're all the same, really. We might look different, we might be from different countries, we might speak different languages, we might have different hair colors or skin colors, but we want the same thing, all of us. We all just want to be happy. So in a way, we're all trying to do the same thing in every action we take every day. So the question is, why do we constantly screw it up? Why is it so hard? Why is it just so damn hard to be happy? This is a simple idea, right? We already said happiness is a simple thing. Simple people think it. It's a simple thought. Why is it so hard? You know, so that's one thing that you can do, you know, as you build the pillars of your house is, you know, make a note to yourself to say, why is it so hard? What's going on here? Okay? Here's one clue, and he clues us in by way of Lord Buddha's first teaching, you know. So we know the story, the legend of the Buddha, right? And he sits under the Bodhi tree and he gets enlightened. You know, he fights through the demons, he fights through all of his demons manifest are trying to stop him from getting there, and he becomes realized, they say. He realizes his happiness in a perfect way. He realizes that he's reached a goal where he's extinguished the flame of suffering. Blew it out, nirvana, right? So, and by the way, okay. So what's the first thing that Buddha says is, right, the legend is the gods come and they talk to him and they say, well, you have to show other people how to do it. And he says, they don't know how to do it. It's too hard to teach. They're not going to get it. And, I can't do it. And of course the legend goes, they ask them over and over again, right, and then finally says, okay, I'll do it. And that's where the ritual, at least in Buddhist teachings often, is that the students request a teaching multiple times. You know, that's they say that one of the areas that comes from. And even though he was quoting the Dalai Lama with that, this isn't, you know, it's implying that this is an Eastern idea too, right? Being hardwired for happiness. But he goes on to quote St. Augustine, one of the founders of Christian theology, who said, the desire for happiness is essential to man and women. It is the motivator of all our acts. the most venerable, clearly understood, enlightened, and reliable constant in the world, not only that we want to be happy, but that we only want to be so. Our very nature requires of us. So it transcends religion and particular traditions and theologies and things like that. So again, the question is what's going on. So Lord Buddha sits down and they convince him to teach it. He says, well, here's the first thing I realized, my first noble truth is life is suffering. So he gives us this huge downer, and we all know that what he's talking about, right? Not that there's no beauty in life, or that life is not worth living, but he says life has a suffering nature to it. Honorable says in the book, but what is relevant to notice now is that it was only from his recently attained perspective of pure, uncompromised happiness and joy that he could for the first time see clearly and truly the features of the state of existence that is not nirvana. Okay? Only then did he have that perspective. Those of us who are not in nirvana cannot really know it, nor can we thoroughly and completely understand the unhappy condition we're in while we're in it. So there's one clue there, right? We can't see it. It's like it's the air that's all around us, and this pervasive suffering due to our ignorance that we can't see it. So we think everything is normal, and he's saying until you step outside of it, and that's why he said we're so inured to it. How am I going to help? I'm not sure people are going to get it. He's probably playing hard to get. All of it's to teach us. So he says, we're after years and years of disappointment and inured to our unhappiness. We're calloused to the pain, such that we usually don't acknowledge it, until and unless, of course, it is so overwhelmingly obvious that we can't help but have to confront it. In other words, until we're enlightened, we don't really know what happiness is. So it's a little bit of a conundrum. You might say, well, we're kind of stuck, right? What Milano is saying here in terms of how do we actually help us on the ground here and now is he says, so we settle for lower happiness. We get by, right? So we kind of deal with samsara, because the Buddha said that the suffering world, he gave it a name, the ocean of suffering, samsara, we're wallowing in it. And again, he's not saying that the world is bad, that it has a quality of being bad. We have a quality of bringing our ignorance to bear so that we're suffering all the time because we don't know how to be happy. We don't know the causes of happiness, so we don't know how to put them into play. He also says we're conditioned, like I said before, by our consumer capitalist society to think that the way to be happy is all of these things out there. The window office, the better camera, the bigger client list, the better girlfriend, the better boyfriend, the iPad, the iPhone, the all of it. And at some point we should start to get a clue that we're in the middle of an unwinnable shell game, where we're constantly switching the source of happiness, and they're helping us do it too. And they're saying, it's this, no, it's this, no, it's this, no, it's this, no, it's this. This one's better. Forget that one. So looking out there for it is where the rub is. Okay? It becomes about so many meaningless things. No wonder that when someone says the goal is to be happy, we think it's a lightweight aspiration because we've been focusing on so many. It couldn't be that. It couldn't be so simple. What did Benjamin Franklin say? I think the best place to hide something is under your nose. Right? It's right there. So I think we need to reset the idea a little bit. And then he goes on to quote the Western monk Matthew Ricard. He says, by happiness I mean you're in a deep sense of flourishing that arises from an exceptionally healthy mind. This is not a mere pleasurable feeling or a fleeting emotion or a mood, but an optimal state of being. So now we can raise the stakes a little bit and say, it's not about the quick fix or the iPad or, the rush of meeting a new girlfriend or boyfriend, even though that can bring wonderful lasting happiness. The feeling itself, the reaching and grasping itself, we need to be in a state of mind where we have some equanimity through the vicissitudes of life. Okay, because they're not taking us up and down. There are things that will experience highs and lows, but we don't have to be riding on this roller coaster. That's the idea. So, and there's a second beat to the idea, which is the value of being happy, and the thing that helps to sustain that happiness being happy in order to help others be happy too. So now here's the active ingredient, right? Is that there's a mechanism that we can put into play if we choose to try it and not walk out of here and not try it. I know many of you already are, but you're here to help me get better at it. Thank you for being so clever. That's the active ingredient, and that's the way for you actually to perpetuate your happiness. And the notion, here's the next beat that's wrong. The notion that it's selfish to be happy. And here's our society, we're just brutal on ourselves. I'm teaching a class, we're pitching another class after this one. It's going to be called The Art of Appreciation. And it's actually not the art of appreciating everything else. It's going to be a part of it, but it's going to be pulling ourselves back to the high, holy practice of appreciating what you're doing. You, every day, every night. I was just studying with one of my teachers out west, and he pounded it into our heads for a week that this is actually one of the most powerful practices there is. So we're going to do that at the end of the month. God willing, and the creek don't rise. Okay. In our society, we're supposed to do everything to our exclusion. We're supposed to be so extremely critical on ourselves, and then if we're not good enough at being critical on ourselves, we can invite everyone else to be that way. It's just like the game of blemish, finding the one little thing and then obsessing on it. So it's not selfish, clearly, and for one very logical reason. You can't help anyone attain any kind of lasting happiness on any level unless you figured out how to do it yourself. Period. And full stop. Does anybody disagree with that? I mean, Anita, would you be a nurse and go deliver babies and stuff if you hadn't learned how to do it? And can you imagine if you walked in and said, okay, well, I have no idea for myself, but this doesn't apply to me, but I'm going to come in and be a nurse with you, or a doctor, or anyone, or a husband, or a wife, really. It's crazy. You can't help anybody. It's the old cliche of, when you're in the plane and they drop the oxygen mask down, the first thing they say is, please put your mask on yourself so that you'll be able to help a child or someone next to you. It's the rule of scuba diving, actually, that if you get in trouble with your buddy, you put your mask on and then you breathe them up. You don't have them rip it off of you and you both perish. So you have to be strong. You have to be, fit for the task of happiness to be able to help other people. Otherwise, you're just a false prophet, and you're toothless, and you're useless. So if you're too shy to find something good about yourself, a reason to be happy, toughen yourself up and then say, because if I don't, damn it, I can't help other people, and then I'm useless. So I better find the value in being happy myself, and I better find the value in myself as a human being, so that I can see it in other people. And I know it sounds like cutesy and nice, but meditation number 2. Think of all the ways we have no faith in ourselves, and how disrespectful we've been to our teachers who've told us that we can absolutely do this. To the Buddha, who said, "I'll teach it to you because I know you can do it, because as a realized being, I only perceive things validly and absolutely, and I don't say anything that I know not to be not that." So we're basically spitting in the face of all of these people who did it to say, yeah, but not me. So have some confidence, have some faith in yourself. Be happy that you can be happy. Don't be sad that you're not happy enough or good enough, Don't throw it out the door. Be happy where you are and that you're acknowledging that you can do it. And then Root then segues into it that says, so the next component of this worldview is, he says there's two people in the world, helpers and helpees. And my personal opinion is we're all both all the time and shifting around, and we have to give ourselves the latitude. But the overall idea is the helpees are the people who are totally focused on their misery and their unhappiness. I'm unhappy, I'm lonely, I'm dissatisfied, my job sucks, it's too hot out, it's too cold out, I need someone to turn the heat up, turn the heat down, help me. The helpers are the ones who say, what can I do for you? Because I'm okay myself. I've gotten myself level. I've gotten myself to a state where I can be a helper. The helper's gotten herself to the point where she's okay and can start worrying about what other people need, right? But it takes you getting to out of the helpy mode. So until you're okay, you really have the mental wherewithal to think much. You don't really have the mental wherewithal to think much about anyone else but yourself. So, and Ronald says that's what unhappiness is, isn't it? I'm unhappy. What about me? What about me? You can't get out of your own way. And in severe cases, it's depression, right? Where all you can focus on is you. You can't get out of bed in the morning. And so he's not, I think, being insensitive to it, but he's saying it's so easy for us to just say, me, 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 me. Being a helper is not instant. You have to be a good gardener. And so, this thing about helpers and helpees is, the point is to get yourself on your feet and stable enough so that you can help other people. Because by helping other people, right, you're able to get the help you need to help you be happier, to help other people be happier, so you lock yourself into this little loop, right? Ronald says, you really have to be a desperado. This is his last opening salvo. Because an idea like being happy is a high goal, goes against the grain and ruffles feathers. And then the idea that your happiness comes from putting others first puts you in a minority. Because we're rugged individualists, and in America it's like, I'm going to get mine. No one's going to keep me from getting mine first. And this is mine, and we hold on to things very tightly. Instead of thinking, wow, the best way for me to have wealth and prosperity is to keep it in circulation. Doesn't do you any good having it out of circulation. Okay. So the first part of the book is like, where do we start then? So we know what the goal is. We want to be happy. We want to move to be a helper and not a helping. We want to be able to get out of our own way, enough so that we can have a sense of stability to help other people. So where do we start? So let's put the measure of a practice in play. The purpose of a spiritual practice is to be happy. And he says, as long as it's coming and emerging from an authentic tradition that's been lasted for millennia, if you want to put it to the test, right? So you take it doesn't have to be this tradition. You take yourself the one that stood the test of time. The litmus test is if you're doing it, you should be getting happier and happier as you go along. If you're not getting happier, there's almost 100% certainty that it's not a problem, he says, with a time-tested tradition and technique. You're probably not doing it right, or you haven't really tried. So first and foremost, in order to get the benefit from any spiritual practice, you have to do it. And again, it sounds so funny, but we all have to remind, I know I have to remind myself, that my phone isn't going off for no reason. It's going off because I screw it up all the time. I have to remind myself that I have to do it, and I don't do it perfectly, but I try. So that's the first step is, are you willing to try? Because, I always say it's like the lottery, you got to play to win. You got to play to win, right? Otherwise, you're never going to get it. So, and you have to be practicing them on a daily basis. It doesn't do any good to go see the Dalai Lama once every 2 years, or go to a class, and then never think about what's said, or pick the book up or read it, or try to keep a book every day. You have to be doing it every day. Because why? Why not every other day? Why not every other week? Because what are we doing every day? All the other crap. It's virulent, right? And karmically speaking, we're draining that karmic ATM all the time, and we're not putting it back. So you have to be balancing this out, at least balancing it out, or it's going to be problematic, kids. It's like the idea of going to church once a week for an hour and a half, never thinking about it again during the rest of the week, and wondering why the next weekend when you go back for the sermon you haven't made much progress. Okay, enough of that, man. But I do find it's where many people get hung up. And I find where I get hung up too, So it's not like you're going to the dress shop to put on a cool Dharma num-num goodie thing so that when you go to the party, people will be impressed and you look beautiful in it. It's to cloak yourself in the spirit of, I was going to say, dissatisfaction in a way. Cloak yourself in the idea of, there's work to be done and I don't have time. And I'm going to put as much time in as I put into the internet or YouTube cat videos sitting on the toilet, or spacing out or watching Conan every night, religiously for an hour and a half. you got to put some time in on it. Well, it's true, right? And it's like, and all of a sudden it's like, what happened to today? And the other thing is these goals don't happen automatically. It takes conscious, sustained effort. And remember too, that it's not a drag to make the effort because you're going to take the happy path to happiness. Okay? You're not going to take the... And people got mixed up, I think, with religions about this too. That religions got kind of messed up over the years. That you're supposed to feel deprived and miserable and not have anything and be, because you don't deserve it, so that you can be happy and transcend it. I just personally think that's not going to be really helpful. So I find that the great teachers in all religions and traditions don't say that at all. They say, no. You have to be happy. You have to be content. You have to take the goal, the result as the path. The thing you want to be has to be the mirror that's reflecting your actions in getting there, not the opposite. That's my opinion. And as you progress in your practice, he says it should get funner. And finally, one should reach the ultimate goal, which is past having been called salvation or heaven or nirvana, but where we might think of as the funnest. So forget those terms. It's the funnest. It's the ultimate fun. It's the ultimate happy. It's the ultimate bliss, right? But in order to get the ultimate bliss, we have to start with lesser versions. Did you really think you'd just be unhappy for a long time, he says, and suddenly get happy? Going along unhappy. And that's the problem that they pose it, that you should be miserable and deprived, and all of a sudden you'll spring into abundance and happiness. It's not going to flop into that. Generally, things don't work that way. One doesn't become a concert-level musician overnight without years of lessons in rehearsing. Change occurs slowly and gradually in small increments, and through regular practice. And that's how it works with the quest for happiness too. Did you think it was really going to be anything else? I always like the expression, make haste slowly. Get going, but do it sweetly, not like a chicken with your head cut off. Right? Try to mimic the way you want it to look. He does that law, right, where you go to bed and you imagine your perfect world and what it looks like and what it smells like and what the temperature is and who's there, and you posit it so that you can get there. So with that in mind, we proceed. So the entry-level pillar is, he says, contentment. The Sanskrit word is santosha. And it's really important to realize this when we enter, that it's going to be really hard to move up from the baseline. It's going to be hard to make this practice move unless we can get a baseline level of contentment. So this is what we're going to work on a little tonight. Identifying, so if you want to be content, let's identify the only time that you can be content. Next week? Can you be content next week? How do you know? Can you be content last week? It's just a memory, it's history. There's only one time you can be content. It's now. And it's not contingent on something else intervening or some magic fairy coming down, or it can only be now. Okay? So let's take a quick survey about right now in the room here. Everybody take 5 seconds and just check in with yourself. Is everything pretty much okay? Everybody pretty okay here? Nobody's like on fire, or it's pretty nice the temperature here. You probably had something to eat today. Generally, that's pretty much our situation most of the time. We're pretty okay in the present moment, and if we could stay in that present moment, we get a lot of space around that. We get a lot of space around that. Right? We're mostly obsessing about first world problems. First world problems. We're not obsessing about when the bomb is going to come raining down and then napalm is going to be all over the place. We're not in that world. We're having a first, Lama always said, I love that term, we're living in samsara, but we're living in designer samsara. We're living in like a peak samsaric existence if you do a survey of what the options are. We have challenges staying in the present. So here's the first thing of a daily practice is try to get present. Use your breath. Many of you are meditators, many of you are good practitioners of yoga and other methods to keep you grounded in the present. And the first is to remind yourself, nothing's happening then. Nothing's happening in the future now. It's a concept that it doesn't work. It's impossible. It's only now, right? But what we do now is going to inform how we experience the future. We'll talk about that later. Probably next week. So we're either obsessed about something. So where are we usually if we're not here? Again, be honest. We're obsessing about something that happened, maybe today, at work. And we bring it home with us, and then we gripe about it at dinner, and we tell our husband about it, or our wife about it, or our girlfriend, and we just relive it. And every moment is just dripping, just falling away, evaporating in our obsession with the past, or we're obsessed about the future. We're worried about what hasn't happened yet. We're living in a dream. Either way, we're living in a dream, right? We're delusional. We're in a waking dream about something that hasn't happened. And usually the future, the way it's going to play out, has nothing to do with the way we're kind of projecting it anyway. So you can relax, I think, a little bit about it too. Try to stay in the moment, Try to follow your breathing, And I mean, even now, if we closed our eyes and focused on our breath, in about 30 seconds, we'd be off on something else. If that, right? We just wander off, So that's when you take a breath again and you try to bring yourself back to the present moment. So let's be in the present moment. And then in the present moment, we're thinking about being content, santosha. Again, we're living at the peak of desire, samsara. So do a scan of where you are in the world tonight. Make a little note, write it down, do a little scan and say, think about what your options might be. We can all do this. Think about what our options are. We're all very worldly people here, very well educated, and we're plugged into the world and the interweb and 24 hours of, pictures being thrown at us. We know how it is, right? We're living at a peak. And so think about it. Think about what your options could be. And of course, this isn't like an absolutism thing. Of course, there are times when even for the lucky of us in the peak of samsara, things are not okay. Look, if you've just been hit by a truck or had bad news about your health from the doctor or a loved one, or things at that moment are not fine at that moment. You're in the middle of what Buddhism calls the suffering of suffering, pervasive suffering, unmistakable pain. Renegade says you're in the disaster. You're in the disaster instead of being in between disasters. He always says we're in between disasters. We'll deal more with the suffering of suffering later. But for people like most of us, most of the time, we're in that in-between state when everything's pretty okay. Okay? So, and everything actually is pretty okay. But we're discontent and unhappy anyway. Right? We've done the scan, we've done the comparison, but we wish we were somewhere else. Or someone else. We can't even be happy in our own skin. We daydream nostalgically about the good old days, Time's gone by, or more often we anticipate times that haven't come yet. That'll be better then, Rather than just staying present and being happy and content now. We're almost never happy. So that's level one, is try to get some modicum of stability in the here and now. And relax and let go. Because if you really think about it in the here and now, everything is pretty okay. And where else can you be? So if you can expand that out, you start to see the implications of something like this. It gets pretty damn good. You can sustain a nice level of happiness enough to get some of these realizations that will take you to a much higher understanding of where the causes of happiness come from. The second level is hard. The second level of santosha is hard because, again, in our commercial society, everyone's telling you not to be happy with what you have. Lama Moon says we have to realize at every turn our own worst tendencies are being encouraged and exacerbated. In case you haven't noticed, the whole economic structure is lined up and arrayed and pointed at you to convince you that you don't have enough. All the time at every angle, from TV, radio, billboards, magazines, your iPhone, pop-up ads now, right? Now they pop up. You don't even go, you don't even have to turn on TV. Your phone pops up. They chase you, they stalk you, right? And what's the message? iPhone 4S sucks. I know we sold it to you, but it's not good anymore. You need the 5. And in 6 months, the 5's going to suck. You're going to want Siri, who speaks in 30 languages or something simultaneously, or a high definition. So it's really funny because when it comes out, though, and you see the interview, with the guy, the British dude, this is the funnest, this experience. We wanted to go beyond that to the greatest level of, and then he's saying the same thing 6 months later. And of course, he's a wonderful designer and a great guy, and it's a great product, right? But they're trying to tell you the thing that they're saying you have to have is going to sell you out. And your car dealers are like that, and everything, right? The lifestyle they're selling. So Ron Wood says, in order to even get the starter kit version of happiness that's Santosha, we're going to have to swim upstream now. From the flow of the dominant, and he says, and all pervasive forces aligned against this. A spiritual renegade should strive not to become well-adjusted in a society where the economy is powered by discontent. It is, right? We're going to have to fight the power, he says, if you want to be happy, and resist the siren song, he says, of consumer capitalism. That harkens back to my early slogan about Mr. Krishnamurti, right? Yeah. Okay, so how to get rolling? Take a look at what you have. What do you need anyway? Okay, think about all the stuff we keep in storage, in boxes under the bed, all the things we haven't used in years that we feel the compulsion to keep. How much do we really need? It's this reality check. So I got a great reality check I want to share with you. I hope this works. And I won't play the whole thing. So I go too far. I think the S-bomb's going to get dropped, but that's all right because they say it on TV now.
I would have been out here a little bit soon, but they gave me the wrong dressing room, and I couldn't find any place to put my stuff. And I don't know how you are, but I need a place to put my stuff. So that's what I've been doing back there, just trying to find a place for my stuff. You know how important that is. That's the whole meaning of life, isn't it? Trying to find a place for your stuff. That's all your house is. Your house is just a place for your stuff. If you didn't have so much goddamn stuff, you wouldn't need a house. You could just walk around all the time. That's all your house is. It's a pile of stuff with a cover on it. You see that when you take off on an airplane, and you're up there and you see everybody's got a little pile of stuff. Everybody's got their own pile of stuff. And when you leave your stuff, you gotta lock it up. You want somebody to come by and take some of your stuff. They always take the good stuff. They don't bother with that crap you're saving. Ain't nobody interested in your 4th grade arithmetic papers. They're looking for the good stuff. That's all your house is. It's a place to keep your stuff while you go out and get more stuff. Now, sometimes you've got to move. You got to get a bigger house. Why? Too much stuff. You got to move all your stuff. And maybe put some of your stuff in storage. Imagine that. There's a whole industry based on keeping an eye on your stuff. Enough about your stuff. Let's talk about other people's stuff. Did you ever notice when you go to somebody else's house, you never quite feel 100% at home? You know why? No room for your stuff. Somebody else's stuff is all over the place. And what awful stuff it is. Where did they get this stuff? And if you have to stay overnight at someone's house, unexpectedly, and they give you a little room to sleep in that they don't use that often, someone died about 11 years ago, and they haven't moved any of his stuff. Or wherever they give you to sleep, usually right near the bed there's a dresser, and there's never any room on the dresser for your stuff. Someone else's shit is on the dresser. Have you noticed that their stuff is shit, and your shit is stuff?
All right. So sorry people were offended by it, but that's what it is. It's shit. and there's no better way to sell these ideas than to have a brilliant comedian like George Carlin point the folly of it out. Right? We're obsessed with our stuff. And mea culpa. Lindsay and I part of our mission in the next year is to go into those storage spaces, which we have on every coast of America, and moving with our houses and our kids and our families, and to de-stuff the stuff, right? I think her dad had a suitcase under his bed, and if it didn't come out of the suitcase after a year, he threw it out.
That's awesome.
So reality check. In the book he says, how much do you really need, Okay, so enough about stuff. I think he did a perfect job. And it's drowning. We're drowning in it. And the mental, the psychic RAM, like, I think our inside we're like a hard drive. We only have so much psychic RAM. David Allen, who's a big productivity guru, has this method called GTD, getting things done. The whole concept of his system and how to do it and prioritize things is because he says you got to get it out of here and put it in a system where you remember it. Because all the stuff is just, it's demanding of us, emotionally, financially. So here's the reality check. Whenever we feel dissatisfied with our material lives and our stuff, he says, you've heard this before, we might want to go back and get in touch with the real facts. So he says, go to globalrichlist.com, globalrichlist.com. Enter your annual income and find out where you rank in the world. All right? Here's from the book. You'll be amazed by how high in the hog you're living. Check out a few of the stats. The average income in the U.S. is the second highest in the world. Only Luxembourg, by the way, is higher. 20% of the world's people living in the highest income countries account for 86% of the total private consumption expenditures, while the poorest 20% consume a minuscule 1.3% of the total. The richest fifth consumes 45% of all meat and fish. The poorest fifth, 5%. Goes on and on and on. 2 billion people in our world live on $1 per day. The poorest fifth, and according to some stats, 50% suffer from malnutrition. And on it goes. The statistics in the book, he says, aren't there to make you feel guilty. They're meant to make us aware of the reality of our lives. That we should call them to mind when we succumb to the temptation of thinking we don't have enough. Right? And we all know the Santosh mantra. Everyone's heard it. Right? Many of you no longer know this one. It's his way to keep us aware of the mission, right? So it's always funny when he starts it, because he's a Sanskrit scholar. So he says, every mantra starts with Om, the universal indicator that it's a mantra's coming, right? And so it's Om, right? We know the rest, right? I have enough. Ahom is the end of the mantra. Om, I have enough Ahom. It means exactly, he says what it says. It's enough. I have enough cars. I pretty much have enough money. I have enough clothes. I have enough room in my apartment or house. I have enough friends. I do okay in the job. I have good entertainment experience. I have enough. And like most mantras, it's not something meant to be pulled out as a cutesy, funny thing. I mean, if it gets you to laugh about it, think about it, but it's not meant as a game. It's really meant as a way to remind you, we do have enough. So here's a thing in your practice that you can do. He says, go on a consumption fast. Okay? 1 day a week. Resolve not to buy anything you don't need for 24 hours. So, put that down in your head. Write it down or think about it. And he says, exceptions, food, fuel for your car, in order to get to work, all that stuff doesn't count. You can do that. But the stuff you catch yourself wanting, a new CD, another pair of shoes, a bigger house, whatever. He said, try to be content for 1 day a week with what you already have. Start habituating your mind to that. All right? And you'll find it's really nice. It's like going on a vacation, and it's a relief. It's really a relief. Half the stuff, with me, it's like really stupid too. Like, I tried to stop after Lindsay's movie that she hosted the other night and go to the ice cream store, and then after waiting a little while, I realized I didn't need it. I said, let's just go. I don't need it. I'm supposed to not be eating it. But really, all the stuff we need to run out and buy. Or I'm feeling a little down on my fast, my consumer fast day today. So there's only one way for me to be happy. I need to buy something. We do, right? We get sad when we get down. And what do? You don't even have to leave the house. You go on the internet and you go into Amazon and you buy stuff to make you feel happy. Because we really think that the happiness is out there in Amazon in their warehouse. We haven't even got to the wisdom part about what can and can't make you happy. We're setting the stage this class. Okay, so we've taken step 1, right? To just have some centeredness in the present moment, and not needing to be somewhere else doing something else, and then not needing all this stuff. Okay, so let's talk about how we can make it happen. And it is about how we look at our world. Albert Einstein said there's only 2 ways to live your life. As though nothing is a miracle, and the other is as though everything is a miracle. As if everything's mundane and nothing, or everything is extraordinary. So which do you suppose is more useful, not to mention a lot more fun? That the world is a boring, bland, plain vanilla, or that the world is rainbow sherbet, every different flavor, right? Which one's going to keep you more entertained again, you know? So one way we can start to look differently about our situation, and Ronald Reed says this, it's good. He says, you know, we're living in a time and place where for, he thinks, 100 years or more, many of our most intellectual and scientific teachers and leaders have been trying to drain the life out of the miraculous, he says. You know, they've been trying to neuter it. Albert Einstein would not fall into this camp with what we just quoted. The official worldview, he says, of our culture, the one ratified by the great majority of our academic mandarins, is a secular perspective that, by definition, the very opposite of religious viewpoint. When we deplete the world of the sacred, he says, we're left with the profane. A life in which nothing is extraordinary. Everything is at least theoretically explainable and explain-awayable, and everything is just commonplace. Do we live in a world like that? But it's really what we're doing. We tear everything down, right? We try to deconstruct it, and one way we can start to look differently about our situation is to just see how amazing things really are. They say in the open sutra teachings of Buddhism, he says in his book, he said, you know, the biggest error we can make, right, is what? Is for you Buddha heads out there. What's the biggest, like, the cardinal error you make in the open teachings of Buddhism? That things exist out there from their own side, right? Things are self-existent. Big mistake. Arnold Root gives us a little clue as to where some of the esoteric teachings point. He says the most serious of our misperceptions is seeing our lives as ordinary and not astonishing marvels and full-on miracles. Cool. It's interesting, right? So it takes us to the Buddhist idea of leisure and fortune. The Buddhists, one of the first things we employ is the meditation called the leisure and fortune meditation. Leisure as in we're presently free from a lot of hindrances and disabilities that could keep us from pursuing a path of happiness, that we literally couldn't do it. And then the other part of the meditation is the realization that it's not an open-ended deal, right? The fortune is that we're free to pursue this aim with our present circumstances, with the life that we're leading now. Things have fallen together perfectly, is where the meditation is trying to lead us. So step one is literally to simply recognize our leisure and fortune, our opportunity. You know, there's all lists of them in Buddhist circles, and you can look the lists up, and some of you know them already. You live in a land where you could practice a path, you don't have physical hindrances, you're a human being, you know, blah, 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 blah. It's good to get clear on the facts of life we are living and stop spacing out, Ronald Root says. We need also to do a little comparison shopping, which we did with Global Roots List, right? And observe the lives that other beings are living. And it's not too hard to realize quite quickly that we are extremely fortunate, and we forget it every day. We just throw it out the window. We get up every day, and we just settle into the routine, and we forget how amazing what we have is. You know, maybe when all of a sudden you find out that something's wrong, you have a problem, then you get that goosebump pronunciation, right? Oh my God, I wish I had been happy. I wish I had made more of my life. You know, don't wait for the call. Do it now, so that if you later in your life, you can do it all sweetly and beautifully, like we see done, because you put your practice into play. Step two. So stop spacing out. Step two, think about the importance of this life. Think about its purpose for you. Right? So if the conditions are pretty perfect for you right now, then you have an opportunity to do something big. You have the opportunity to do something really powerful and magnificent. Think about what a waste it would be not to take advantage of it. You know, and you've all read the story of the turtle that lives in the bottom of the sea, and every 100 years it comes up for a breath of air, and they say, what if a golden hoop was laying on the expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, and that turtle, when it comes up to breathe, surfaces, and the hoop goes right around its neck. Of all the expanse of, you know, zoom out like you're in your satellite photo, and you know how big the ocean is. We know now, because we have the powers to see how big it is, right? We don't have to guess. They say the odds of that happening are the same odds that you have the situation that you have now, brought to you by Mr. or Mrs. Karma, right? Think about all, and if we don't have to get into past and future lives here in Buddhist dogma, you can see how many lives you've had in your life alone. And if you look around just the human realm, you can see how many options there are in different parts of the world, and that could have been you. There, but by the grace of God. That could be you. But look at what you have. So Decide what you want to do with it, right? Because it's not guaranteed. This isn't like a guarantee. We go to sleep on that too. We think that it's going to be every day, until the day you wake up with an ache and a pain, or it's harder to do something, or your mind slips a little bit. You have to take advantage of it now, and because the truth is, because it's not out there, you're going to put the realizations into place that you're going to have, and when you have them, things are going to ripen in you, and they're going to stay that way, right? So decide what you want to do. Decide what you want to do. Master Shantideva, the great master, Indian master and sage and author of the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, says, there's nothing more deluded, nothing more fraudulent than for me to have found such an opportunity as this one, and yet not to have used it to cultivate virtue. To cultivate the virtue that you can have in your life. Right? And step 3 is to meditate on impermanence. The turtle analogy. Meditate on the turtle analogy. This is a rare and fleeting and incredible moment, and it can change like that, And it's not meant to scare you; it's meant to wake you up. And if you don't wake up, you should be scared, and you will be ruled by fear until you wake up. See, the fear will hold on to you. It'll be like a coat you wear until you decide to take it off, and you don't take it off by living in a cocoon of ignorance and not wanting to know. It's by opening your heart and your eyes and looking, and that's how you get free. And then you won't have anything to worry about. See, you'll get to a point where you won't have anything to be afraid of. So Master Shantideva again says, so beautiful and poetic, you must make use of this boat, which is this human life, to cross over the great river of suffering. O foolish one, don't just sit there sleeping. He says, for this boat is very hard to find later. You all know the story of the Buddha, right? These are like, one-on-one stories, right? Where someone said, Lord Buddha, they're teaching, what are the odds of me having gotten this life? And he looks down into the ground and he puts his finger in the ground, something to this effect. He lifts it up and he says, the amount of grains on my finger here to the expanse of all the dirt of the earth is the odds you have in this life. And what about the next time, getting it in the next life? Other way around. It's not a done deal. See? So you have to use this opportunity now. And if you look at the Buddhist scriptures, and if you look at, they'd say you actually have the perfect incarnation now. As a human in this realm, with the resources you have, there's no better opportunity. You're like an arrow that's been shot across time and has been traveling forever to get these situations to line up just right. All the lottery balls fell in the right place, right? And they say if you're even aware of if these things even come to us, and these teachings and these great masters whose works have been translated in our lifetime to our language, and we're learning them in our own towns, if you're hearing that, they say that you're just like the arrow and you're about to pierce the target. You're that close. And to drop it now and not do it would be a cosmic tragedy. But that's what my teachers always said. And I said, and you have to decide whether they were trying to buck you up with hyperbole or whether they were being literal. And you have to decide whether the turtle analogy was literal or not. I've been told. No, you decide. You decide. So then Lord says, and think about when we think our good fortunes are worldly cities. Cities is a word for powers. The ancients, the adepts were called Mahasiddhas. Maha, great powers they had. And he always says, the appearance of these miracles are taking place in our life all the time, and they're an indication of you being that arrow hitting the target, right? But because our goal in our society is to wash it all away as mundane and meaningless, but not that, then we dismiss it. Wake up to the life you're living. We can easily go to sleep and see it as ordinary. So it says, in ancient texts they say, they're interesting when seen through modern eyes. Signs such as advanced practitioners included the ability to quickly traverse great distances, to fly through the sky, skywalkers they call them, and to travel speedily over water. They say such a wizard could also obtain the ability to communicate to others from miles away, or see small things from a great distance, have great vision, or be able to become so small they could perceive infinitesimally tiny atoms, or so large they could see planets up close. Sound familiar? And he says in the book, can we do these things? We actually do have the ability to travel great distances quickly. We call them cars. Or to fly in the air. We call them airplanes. And to go fast over water. You do it in Gloucester on your boats and your jet skis, right? we communicate instantaneously with our little magic devices, right? You pick it up and I can call anywhere in the world. And then what about omniscience and powers like that? Oh, I can just Google it. I can find out pretty much anything. I can reference something. I can get a quote. I can on my phone I can speak English and it tells me exactly what the Spanish thing is instantly. I can go up to someone and speak other languages, right? They say that Buddhists can speak in all languages to all people. You know, he says, are we the very modest cities the ancients described in their sacred literature? Both those things don't count, one might object. Those aren't really supernatural powers, that's just technology. Those aren't superpowers. That's not romantic enough. It's just technology. But the technology made it possible for us, he says, to acquire the very powers imagined in the old texts. Who cares about the delivery system, I'd say? You know, who cares about the delivery system? You had the karma to have it delivered to you. We discount such abilities only because they seem routine and commonplace to us. But, he says, what do you suppose if those ancients were transported here into our world? Would they just dismiss these as just technology? Or perhaps they'd say, holy crap, that's what I meant by flying. They're doing it. They're getting in the magic bird and they're flying. You know, you fly like a bird. And way more comfortably than having to flap your wings and, you know, and get, you know, scrape the insects from our faces, he says, and get our hair messed up. And then, of course, the other thing, if I had found it, was the great Louis C.K., the rant he does. You've all heard it, yeah, about, you know, that you're sitting in an airplane, the magic flying seat at 30,000 feet, and you're pissed because, you know, the sandwich didn't come fast enough, or, you know, your internet is not working perfectly. It's like you're in a magic seat floating in the air, you know, and you can't see the miracle in it. So what cash out here is, no one has a better shot. You know, our teachers have always told us jokingly, half-jokingly, I think, that we're like amnesiac yogis. We're waking up to the fact that we have all these incredible resources, and they're coming as like the fruits, I think, of our evolution, and we're seeing them as commonplace. But we're not understanding that it's just, this is a beautiful evolution. It's how it's manifesting for us. So start to wrap your head around the fact that the resources and the information we have is an incredibly good, I think, advantage we have to the external stuff that we have now gives us a chance to work inside. You know, you can use it all. You can use it all. So, you know, and you decide. It's just another gizmo, or it's a miraculous manifestation of things that are incredibly useful to us. So, let's realize what life is meant for. What we can do with this life if we made just a few adjustments. See, we're not talking about leaving your home, or shaving your head, or hopping on one foot, or moving to a commune somewhere. I'm talking about waking up in your house. I'm talking about looking at your family in the eye and seeing them as the greatest practice that you could do. I'm talking about going out into your neighborhood and your world, you know, not changing your clothes, not, you know, just reorganizing your priorities a little bit with the motivation that you really want to be happy in this life, and to mindfully use all these resources and develop a sense of joy in doing the work, right? Period. Joyful effort. If you did that, he says, we could do in a lifetime, you could reach the contentment, happiness, joy, and even put us in a place, in a position that would help us do it for others. You know, there's no one else on the planet who has a better shot at doing this. You know, that's what my religion's always held up. My Lama's always said, it's all green lights at this point. Nothing's holding us back, except our own lack of belief and our addiction to diversions. Gee, that's it. See, if you saw it as fun as looking at the kitty thing on YouTube and saw it as useful, you would do it all the time. And here's the great thing is, if you did do it all the time, it would start to work on you. See, you'd start to feel it, and you start to see it in your life, and then you get feedback. And most of you have. I know a lot of you are really excellent at this. And your family feeds it back to you. Wow, you're different. Wow, you're happy. Wow, the thing I thought you were doing that I could never accept, it's okay because you're really amazing, and you're really kind to me, and I see that you're kind to other people, and you're patient. So they buy in, and you get the feedback, and then you want to do it. It's like meditation. You do it long enough, and when you don't do it, you feel a little off. Lastly, the texts say we have to be aware of how very rare, fantastic, magical, and blessed a life like ours really is. So do the math. Do the math. Don't forget the statistics. Appoint yourself, arm yourself with the facts of your life, and then stop the obliviousness and the wastefulness. You know, Choose to see that there are miracles and that your life is proof of that. Because it's not a miracle, it can be a miracle. You get to choose, because it's not one or the other, self-existently. You can choose. Right? So think about it. Go home. And in between here and if you come back to the next class, spend the week meditating on these things and think about, is it worth making this choice? Do I want to put at least maybe a summer into this, or 6 months, or 9 months, or a year? And track it and journal it and use all the tips in the book and all the checklists that are there, So here's the first exercise, the morning law. So tomorrow morning, let's all wake up, right? By the way, I'll cheat, I'll go to the end of the book. One of the things he says you should do every day is get a good night's sleep. So get a good night's sleep. So when you wake up from your good night's sleep, do the morning law, okay? Meditate on the miracle, first of all, that your eyes opened up this morning. You can think about how many people will not wake up tomorrow morning. There's statistics and insurance and actualities and stuff like that. And I'm not going to kill you, I got my eye on the clock. It's a miracle. And then think about what you woke up and look around you. The relative affluence we have, your house. We have air conditioning, most of us, some of us, You have warmth, you have a heater in the winter. You have schools to take your children to, and they're usually free. You have all the gadgets and gizmos, the information. Okay, so that's one. The world you came into, the fact that you were able to come into it, and that you're relatively healthy today, that you have a body and mind that's functioning. And then, after you see that you're warm and safe, and we have the karma to live in a home, think about the people around you, your family, your friends, people who love you and care about you, and have helped you, and support you, and the spiritual community you might have that helps you. Don't just forget about it when you wake up in the morning. I have a little banner on my wall. Those little scrolls, Dalai Lama scrolls, and I got one that for me it says that. So it's hard for me to miss it in the morning. Like, wake up to me. As Lindsay would say, she used to study with the great William Campbell. And she was at a class once. He was a kid who was like sleeping in the front, and he had a wooden pointer, I guess he used to use. And he walked up to the kid. He slapped it down in front of him, grabbed him by the tie. He goes, "Sonny, wake up! Eternity is now." So wake up! Eternity is now. And then think about the education that you received. So that you're relatively healthy, and then the education that you received. The fact that you're literate. The fact that you can study. I mean, some people are so handicapped they can't read or write or see or study. You have to develop some gratitude about this. And don't go to sleep on it. Okay. And then the people who have been kind enough to teach us, all the teachers we've had in one form or another, formally, informally, they're all around us. And that they have also taught you to reason for yourself. Because no one should ever come to a thing like this and listen to it, or even, I dare say, read Lala Root's book and just do what he says because he wrote a book and the book looks good and I guess I should. Reason, think about it. Does it make sense? Is it logical? That's what they would want you to do. You have the ability to do that, and then you can choose with wisdom. And then also be really happy that there are spiritual traditions that we have that you can follow, faiths and religions, no matter what the one for you is, that they're authentic, and you live in a place where you can walk out the door and come to a center and buy a book, a holy book off a shelf, and no one arrests you, nobody persecutes you, and you're not stoned in the streets or beaten. I mean, think about it. You don't have to go far to realize that it happens. We've seen it happen. Okay? We're incredibly blessed. And it's not a free right in this country. We better make sure that as we get into the wisdom section, we know where it came from. So that you can do it in your country, and we know the ways to do it. To support other religions, to be tolerant, to help other people, and then to realize that it doesn't matter what your faith and religion is. If someone is in earnest and authentically practicing something, then they're just doing what we're doing. That's what separates religions. It's not this. It's this. You have a path or you do not. But if you do, respect it, and be really happy that you have one. And then what I always do is what if it was my last day when I woke up? What if there's actually the other thing on the wall next to the scroll said, by the way, newsflash, it ends at midnight. What would you do? How would you use the time? What would be important to you? Because there will be a day when that will happen. So you better get going and think about it. What would be important to you? What would you not do as opposed to what you would do? For me, it's like, what would I drop? What petty thing would I drop? Would I get into the thing with the neighbor? Would I hold some grudge? You know how meaningless it is. There's always the story of, guess Michael's first trip or something. He was on a plane, and they basically said, we have to make an emergency landing. And everybody all of a sudden changed miraculously. He said the compassion for other people, the care, the understanding that they're all in the same boat, the tenderness was amazing. And of course, then they said, we got it, we're okay. And within minutes, everyone was back to their selfish, greedy, you're taking up too much space, why is your arm on the armrest? You see people like get into the armrest wars, and you're asleep and you try to slide over, and it's easy to go back to sleep again, right? So maybe, here's some tips he has for things you can do today for unsquandering the miracle, he calls it. Unsquandering the miracle. Maybe a half hour less TV. These are all easy little slight adjustments, right? Maybe a 5-minute meditation during your break at work. I know a guy I work with, he's really cool. Sometimes I'm self-conscious about it. He shuts the door, turns everything off, puts a sign on the door, and he meditates in the middle of a television studio every day. And then he comes to my sofa and sleeps too. You can't sleep at work on other people's sofas when they're in there. Get some exercise. The miracle of your body. Get back in touch with the miracle of your physicality. Right? And then remember to help somebody else. Remember there's other people that you can help, which is good for you. And then find something that that you've been meaning to do, but you're always putting off, and do it. And acknowledge it and be happy that you did it. See, you can be doing this every day. Little tiny things. And when I say acknowledge you do it, don't just say, yeah, I did a thing. I did a thing, and I'm going to stop and write down that I did it. And when I go to bed, I'm going to do that thing where I'm going to actually play a movie of all the good things I did and really appreciate what I did. It's incredibly powerful, especially when you're going to sleep and your subtle consciousness is arising. And it can go in, so you can do work that we can't do in the ADD world every day, where the world is, I want to do a talk about that, where we're being groomed for ADD to go back that way. It used to be, we were kind of wired that way as hunter-gatherers. And now, and then we became hunters, farmers, and we did things on schedules. But now, society's trying to get us back there, to multitask all the time, right? It's very interesting. How to get off on that? Something you can do, and acknowledge it, and keep track of it, and make a list of these things that you want to do, and write it down. I did watch a half hour less TV. But what do you want to do in that half hour? You could read a really, really, really cool book. You could take a walk. You could be with your family. You could do homework with your kid. Or you could just tuck them in and stay an extra half hour and find out what they're reading. And let them know you love them. Or you can watch Jackass, the movie. So here's the mechanism. Real quick, we'll get started on employing the karmic worldview. So the underpinning of the daily practice is to have some basic understanding of how this is working. We just talked about things to do, but we haven't talked about, so why would that work any different than the other stuff I've done? What makes that so special? Again, you have to be thinking about this all the time, right? In the morning law, if it's true that we're living in a miraculous life, some thought needs to be put on how we arrived at this miraculous. It's not enough to say it's a miraculous life. How did we get here? How did we get here? We never really spend much time figuring out how things are working, how we got here, how things are happening. You guys a lot of you are well trained in it, and this has been your practice for a while. But for many people, this book opens up a whole kind of consciousness about, I never thought about it. What is my worldview? What do I think? What do I think? Robert Thurman was always one of the best meditation advices I thought was useful for me was he said, don't go to class and sit there and meditate on what you think you're supposed to meditate, or what the Lama just told you, or your teacher, or whoever. Meditate on what you believe. And don't go home and say, I have to think this now, this is what I have to be. Just think about, I believe this. I don't know about future lives. I haven't had one. And they're talking about it. Could it be possible? What do I think? And then analyze it from what you think. And then it will either hold up or it will slowly start to shift based on the information that you continue to gain. And then you'll have a reasoned understanding of how you want to view things. So 3 worldviews, and Ronald Rich says lazy agnosticism on the question of how the world is working does not count as a worldview. Phoning it in that way. And certainly will not help us learn to become happy people. Not taking the time to think about life and its mechanisms will not further one's spiritual growth. So as Socrates famously said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And he was right. There's no virtue in being a bubblehead, however it says. That's his addendum to Socrates. That's why I love the guy. I mean, you do. So how do things happen? How does life really work? Ronald was always positive from day one. And he said his great philosophy teacher said the same thing, that there's only 3 worldviews. And he's always said, if you find another one, let me know. So here's worldview number 1. It's all random. The idea the idea that things happen for no real reason. It's just S happens. Right? It just happens. Part of the problem with this is what? That if it's all just random, there's really no reason for us to try to do anything at all. Because we have no power and nothing makes any sense. So it kind of really is limiting and it weakens us, I think. If we assume that things happen arbitrarily, we have absolutely no control over his lives, he says. We remain disempowered and we remain feeling victimized and without hope. I'm not sure how many people think that everything is random, by the way. That's a kind of a weird, I don't know. Worldview number 2 is he calls the cosmic micromanager. The idea that there is a superior being who is micromanaging the universe and controlling everything. Everything. The idea that it's all being controlled. This kind of scenario produces the same dilemma, kind of from a different direction. As, in the sense that we're pretty helpless again here, right? And that if everything is being micromanaged, there's really nothing that we can do for ourselves. It's also, it's hard to, we also have to grapple with the difficulties of the idea of this cosmic micromanager who's all powerful not being able to just fix this for us. If they were all powerful and it all came from them, then why would we suffer for an instant? So we end up just like our children. We'll always just ask, why mommy, why daddy? Why? And we know how it always goes, right? And we all have that, right? You're driving the car and so you go by and you see a car that's like in the ditch or something. Well, why is the car in the ditch? Well, it looks like they had an accident, Billy. Well, why do they have an accident? Well, I guess they got under control. Why are they under control? Because the car malfunctioned. Why is one person sitting okay and the other person, the doctors are looking at, well, he had a seatbelt. Why? Seatbelt was on. I don't know, Billy. The seatbelt was on. You start to get getting a little nervous. Well, why was his seatbelt on? Don't know, Billy. Well, why did the car turn this way, not that way? And finally, what do you say to Billy? Just because, dude. Just stop asking me. You go back to reading, your comic book. Don't want to know, right? And that's really what happens. So we're programmed to learn to stop asking, actually. Right? We're programmed. We're programmed to learn to stop asking. So we're programmed just because is good enough. And Ronald Reed says, as adults, you have to return to the why mommy, why daddy scenario and ask ourselves the same question. He feels accepting any version of the answer no reason is not only intellectually defeatist, but also disempowering and irresponsible. So you don't get to wear the spiritual renegade t-shirt if you give up that easy on the why daddy question. So you have to give it back for a while until you can wear it again. So he says you have to ask that question. And there's a third option, of course, in the book. And the third option is this, that there actually are explanations and reasons behind things, that nothing happens just by luck, randomly and inexplicably, or by the arbitrary will of an inscrutable God. We all have full responsibility over our lives, and therefore everything we do matters. That's worldview number 3. It's called causality. That everything is in an interconnected web, and all of the things have consequences for other things that we do and say and think. The idea that everything happens is the effect of a previous cause in itself. And itself acts as a cause for a future effect, right? It says that everything falls into the web of causality. Eastern cultures would call this karma, right? Of course, in the West, we know about this too. This isn't just an Eastern notion. This karmic system is a presentation, and it's unique. But how is this different from a Christian scripture that says, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you"? I swear to you that one day you will give an accounting of every word you have ever spoken. Give and you shall receive. You cannot get grapes from thistles. You reap what you sow. That sounds pretty karmically cool. Buddha didn't say that, right? As long as says, our guy said that. So you can, be happy that they're on the same page. They're not exclusive to any group, obviously. And there's a golden rule in every authentic tradition, The idea, the unconscious mythic idea of why we gravitate towards this will spring up in the tradition that you choose, that you have the karma to find, right? So you don't have to be nervous about the word karma. If it's like, well, I'm a Christian, I'm a karma, or, karma just works, and you can label it any way you want. And it's the only worldview that gives us hope and direction over our future in a way. It's a sense of control. Because if you want a good life, if you want a happy life, if you want good relationships, if you want people to be kind to you, or honest with you, or believe what you say, and trust you, the implication is what? You first have to create the cause for these things to happen. It has to go out before it can come back. The desired effect needs the appropriate causes to be put into place. But there's a sense now, right, of wow, there's a rudder on this ship. I can steer this. I can be a part of this. In fact, it's all coming from me. Karma is not a thing that's out there. You are your karma. You're the process of karma. That's what you really are. I sometimes like the analogy that it's like an echo. That we send our voice out and it travels and it bounces off things, it interacts with them, it comes back, amplified and multiple, right? And stronger and more powerful. It's kind of one way to look at the kind of karma. It's an example, one. The connotation of karma that we really don't want to hear is that part about we must take total responsibility then for everything that happens in our life. Everything we say and everything we do counts and has meaning. That's the part where we want to go la 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 la. And herein lies the rub, right? We don't want to go to that place that says everything's a reflection of our past actions. And our future will be a reflection of how we act here and now. But it's the only thing to me that makes sense. In his book, looks at the idea that to a degree we all do really believe in causality. It's, what do we say we don't? It's why we act out our lives in the way we do. Really, why would you send your kids to school? If you think that anything that they learned one year had no relation or correlation or was an impetus for what they would evolve through the next year, it was all just random and didn't mean anything, you wouldn't send them to school. Because there'd be no continuity of their consciousness in that way. So we all really believe it deep down inside. We just don't like the hard truth of it. Is that you're responsible now, and that's a deep problem. And of course we say, what about things in the world that seem unconnected to me and I see them? But you're responsible for the fact that you have the karma to see it happening in your world, right? That you have it happening. We talked about that in the last class. Where people saying, well, how can I be happy when there's so much suffering in the world? And I don't know if you were here. I used one of my essays quote. I said that makes no sense at all. That you would be unhappy because there's suffering. That's another. I'll revisit that one later. Maybe next week I'll bring that quote back. It doesn't make logical sense. The problem is he feels that while we do subscribe to a version of causality, the form of it that we believe in is incorrect, and that things can't really be happening the way we think. So now it starts to get fun. Hard work alone, he says, for instance, couldn't really be the cause for money. And having money isn't necessarily a cause for having a home or a car. Things are caused, but not the way we think they're happening. So he starts to change gears on you. He says it's a crucial part of what the spiritual traditions call wisdom to realize that the way things appear is not how they really are. If things existed in just the way they seem, if, for example, cause and effect were obvious and transparent, there would be no need for wisdom. I think it's really cool. Should I say that again?
Please.
It's a crucial part of what traditions call wisdom to realize that the way things appear is not how they really are. If things existed in just the way they seem, if, for example, cause and effect were obvious and transparent, there would be no need for wisdom. Because you wouldn't need to impute on these things or infer on these things or use logic, right? And they say that karma, the inner workings of karma, they say, are even more deeply hidden in ways than emptiness, how it's actually working. So this is where wisdom comes into play. This is what needs to inform our daily practice to bring us to any results. Otherwise, we're just meditating and reinforcing false modalities of thinking. Then you're going home. That's why you have to work at this stuff, because you don't want to go home every night and meditate on something that's wrong. It's like your bad golf swing. You got to correct the errors. Or you're going to be in the rough all the time. You want to get down the fairway a little bit. So, what's a cause? We need to see what a cause is or what it's not. And we've been over this. A main cause for something is not something that brings about the effect some of the time. It's something that it's something that needs to work all the time to be a real cause. A real cause, a main cause. There's conditioning factors and things like that, right? A real cause. If you got on a plane and took a trip and the pilot came out and said, do you know how to fly the plane? Do you know the cost for this plane to fly? Yeah, we could, 30% of the time we got it. It works 30% of the time. We've got a handle on it. No. You get in that plane, man, because you say, dude, you don't know why the plane flies. That's not a cause. It has to happen every time, You have to say the lift happens and there's they have to be able to reproduce the experiment over and over again. He also says, in effect, it's not something that could not be brought about without a specific cause, too. You look at it the other way, right? Master Shantideva says, a cause of something is that thing which, when it is absent, its effect cannot happen. And wanted, and when it is present, its effect must happen. So it's like the acorn, right, and the oak tree. You can plant the acorn and have some sun, maybe not some sun, varying degrees of light, maybe a certain soil or not, and you can get the tree. But if you don't put the acorn in, you'll never get the oak tree. That's the main material cause, the thing that flops over, they say, into the final result, right? So what Lama Root is saying is, what he's calling real causality here now, you have to kind of get a handle on it because we need to compare it to how we usually see things. What he's calling real causality, we have to compare to what we're calling causality. So let's go to the book. It's hard work the cause of money, he says. And we all know this example, but for those of us who don't, I think most of us usually assume, I'm just reading this, that if we need money, we also need to get a job and work hard at it, right? That's the ethic we've been raised with. He says, but let's see, according to the principles of causality, if that's really how we get money, does everybody who works hard always earn lots of money? There are billions of people in our world who don't have enough money even though they work harder than most of us have ever worked in our lives and ever will. And there are plenty of people who don't work hard at all, or who don't work hard and don't even work at all, so they get plenty of money. His thing is always the check comes in the mail. It just magically comes into your mailbox. Karma delivers a check. So hard work simply cannot be the real cause of money. And money, in turn, cannot be the real cause of having a nice home or a car or the ability to go to the movies, i.e. the things that you do with the money. He says, again, let's check. If money were the cause of having a nice new home, nobody would ever have a nice home without money. And everyone with money would always have a nice home. Without the cause, the effect is impossible. With the cause, the effect is inevitable. Right? And the same goes for cars, the ability to go to movies, to take nice holidays, to buy new MP3 players, he says, and so on. Got it? And it's true, right? If aspirin cured headaches, right, then everyone would take Advil and the headache would be gone. But we know that that's not true. Sometimes you take it and it works, and sometimes you take it and it doesn't. So it can't be the cause, air quote cause. Here's another example. He says, does exercise, let's say doing yoga poses regularly, bring about strength, good health, and longevity? What's our real first answer? Sure. Good for you. He says, but it cannot. It cannot be the cause of any of these. Why? If strength, good health, and longevity came from conscientiously doing yoga poses, that everyone who did their yoga practice daily would always be strong, healthy, and live to a ripe old age. And no one who didn't do yoga would ever be strong, healthy, and long-lived. The fact that statistics now suggest that as many as 25% of people who do yoga have sustained an injury that they can attribute to doing that very activity indicates that yoga actually can't be working the way we may think it does. And it's not just yoga, of course, right? He says before the yoga craze, there was running and jogging. We all know the story. Remember Jim Fixx? For those of you who are old enough, Jim Fixx was this icon who wrote the book of running. Famous runner who dropped dead of a heart attack at the age of 52 one day after his morning run. If running brought good health and long life, how come Jim Fixx died at such an early age while running? Got it? Cases like that are things that he still has, on the road. He says things that make you go, If I had a little bit to it, would be very good. I'd be more inscrutable. When it comes to our belief in the kind of causality we ordinarily believe in. But what do we really believe? See? We don't really think about these things. We do believe that they self-existently work, and if I do it, it will work. So what he's saying is the thing that we're usually calling a causality, that worldview, is actually something that's really happening, hit or miss, and we reify it. Something's just kind of happening, and then we're making it self-existently a cause. Home stretch here, 10 minutes. Let's see how we can do. So what he's saying is causality is the worldview, but we don't have a handle on the worldview. Actually, we don't really have it right. So the comment that there, I'm going to compress some things. So working hard to be a condition for which you can get money and exercise can be the condition for which you get healthy. You need to see them rather as possible delivery systems for karma. The thing itself that is yoga, the job, isn't the cause, but it is the potential, the field of potential for which the karma can ripen for you. And what do you think might be the cause, actually, to have yoga work for you? Taking care of other people's health and bodies, right? And also the motivation for what you're doing yoga. It's for the same reason as of the trust fund. Someone might say, person B never did a day's work in their life, and the check comes in the mail, man. That's not fair. Those selfish bums. But what's the potential for why their check is coming into their mailbox? They must have been incredibly generous at another time. And the trust fund check is just the delivery system for the karma of having been generous. Now, what they do now, in terms of the karmic ATM, will drive in the future whether that still comes to them in that kind of facile way, right? Just like, technically you'd have to say someone robbed the bank, right? Did robbing the bank get them the money? And you'd have to say no. They were generous in the past and they got the money that way, but the way in which they got it now is going to be a big problem down the road. See, we have to separate out, and we're going to do a whole little karma section next session. So what we're usually doing, and the bottom line here is this. The karmic worldview assumes that all the things that happen to us in life are caused, okay? No accidents, no randomness, okay? Might seem that way sometimes. And it embraces the bottom line version of causality, that the false overlay of causality is what we use, okay? I worded that weird. He quotes someone who says, if we were to adopt karma, we mostly adhere to a causality that works all the time, the same everywhere and for everybody without exception. And there are no karma-free zones. No karma-free zones, okay? It's like, I always likened it like the 7-Eleven when you go in and the little camera's on, that and it's always on, right? The karma cam's always on, But it's not some judgmental deity out there that's judging you, or some otherworldly being, or it's you. You are the karma cam. See, it's nothing out there. It's you. It's you perceiving your actions and having it unconsciously and consciously register, and it's planting subtle seeds in your consciousness for you to see how you think your world is operating, and it comes back to you in that way. So you're the karma cam. So it really is insane when you think about why you'd ever like cheat on a test or lie or something. Who are you fooling? You know, who are you fooling? I mean, really, it's hysterical when you think about it. So we usually hopscotch our worldviews, right? You know, the example is always like, you know, the plane example again is, you know, so or the lottery example, the lottery ticket, right? We both buy a lottery ticket, right? And Allison wins the lottery, and I'm like, oh man, that's so random. She won it. It's not fair. You know, now it's just random. It just happens, right? And if I win it, it's like, well, they've delivered me, the omniscience of the universe has delivered me what I deserve. You know, or we believe in karma at that point. Of course karma works. I'm such a wonderful person. Or you're on the plane and the pilot comes on and says you have to make an emergency landing. And then, you know, the church you go to once a year, you start praying to that God, you cut a deal. Oh, omniscient, who rules everything, God, please suspend the laws of gravity and physics and have the plane stay in the air, and I swear to you, I'll be there next week, but I'll give twice as much in a donation bowl, and I'll actually read the Bible. Right. Whatever's convenient at the time is usually the worldview we adhere to. So I implore you to go home now and think about the worldviews, and think about how you skate in and out, and which one do you think holds up, and then stay with it, okay? Pick your worldview, but stick with it. And if you're going with karma, remember there's no karma-free zones. It's like what Ron calls all-in poker. You're all in. And everything good and everything bad. You can't have one and not the other. Okay? And divorce yourself from the fact that it's the way your world is coming to you is courtesy of your actions and deeds. Be on the lookout for how easy it is to bail on your worldview. It's so easy. It's so easy to bail when it's not working out the way you want. So you change the scenery, you know, just switch the backdrop. And then he gave some examples of false causality, you know. I compliment someone and I don't get a nice response back is due to the compliment that I gave her, you know. It's like for instance, if I say to Jillian, that's a beautiful shawl you're wearing. And she says, what do you mean this thing? I hate this, and it fell, you know, my mother made me wear it, and I don't want to be wearing it. And you know, and I go home and I'm like, wow, you know, I said something nice. If I meant it in a genuine way, you know, could I be perceiving her being mad at me for being kind to her or saying something nice? No. See, the false causality is that cause that. But because karma, there's a delay between the things we do and the delivery of the karma. And it sometimes can be years, lifetimes, you know. It's like connect them, but they're not connected. Because next week we'll talk about the karmic laws as something, in the world of causality, something bad that I'm experiencing can't come from my doing something good. So if I'm experiencing or being very critical of my compliment, I'd have to probably track back and say I can't put my finger on it, but logically it means because I've been very kind of inhospitable to people who have tried to give me a compliment in the past. I've been that person, and so now it's coming. The echo is coming back. It's bouncing off years, places, spaces, lifetimes, and I'm experiencing it. And we forget it because we want to connect every frame of the film to the exact one that's coming, flickering up next on the karmic screen. But that's not the way karma works, and we'll talk about it, right? Same thing as the bank robber example, right? Same thing as the example that says of lying at work in order to get a promotion. You know, where did the promotion come from? Did it come from lying? No, it didn't. It's coming from a totally different cause that's coming up in that field and ripening in that moment. But the fact that you're lying now does not bode well for the karmic seed you just planted now. So it's all about being a good gardener. And again, when can we be a good gardener? This goes back to the beginning of the class. Next week? Last week? No. Now, in the present. So stop worrying about that you did it bad last week. And stop excoriating yourself. And stop worrying that you're going to be crappy at it next week. Do it now. Just garden in front of you now and do it sweetly and with an open heart, and you won't have to worry, you know, because that's all you can do now, and you'll be content, you'll be happy, you'll know that you're planting a good future seed, and you'll be able to help other people do it too. And it'll help you let go of stuff when it's not going your way in the present. Because you can say it's not exactly the conversation I'm having, it's coming from somewhere else. I can relax, and I can accept the situation, knowing that it will change. And then I can act wisely now, though, because it's going to inform the color of the world that I'll see later down the road. So decide on your worldview, you know. Again, John Lennon wasn't right, actually had a little wrong with instant karma. So that isn't an instant karma moment. We have to put the cause into place, and it ripens, and then we experience it later. So you can relax a little bit too. If it's not going perfectly in the moment, the thing that flowered, you can't jam back into the ground and make it go away. So just and you can't muscle it or manage it right now either. I mean, if Lindsay came up and yelled at me right now, I could have a couple of different choices. I could like defend my space and yell back and think that would make her stop, or I could ignore her, or I could hit her over the head with the cookie, or there's a lot of things I could do. Or I could be nice and quiet and just take it. Which one in the moment is gonna do anything about the karma I'm experiencing in the moment I'm experiencing? None of them. It's ripening now. It's happening now. So, but how I choose to see it and what I choose to do in the moment is going to inform what happens later. So if I listen to her and say, wow, she's very upset and she's remonstrating with me, and I'm perceiving it as being not very inviting, then I must have done that in the past, or I wouldn't experience, and especially someone I love doing it to me. So I better just relax and realize where it came from. And then not do anything. But I can't make it stop and go back in the ground. But I can fix it I can build a better garden. All right. And then lastly, taking refuge in it's worked out good. This is actually the end of the first section. Taking refuge in causality. And what I mean by that is the fact that things work is good news, not bad news. See, because you can put yourself back in the driver's seat to a degree, right? Because once you figure out the playbook, there are rules, right? You can then work on the machinery, the karmic machinery, to your advantage, right? Advantage being spiritual progress, not selfish advantage. Advantage being spiritual progress, so you can help yourself to be happy, so that you can show other people to be happy, and you can experience a world that is happier and more fulfilling. That's your pure world, right? It's not out there. Let's say the Buddhists are the pure realms. You think it's like some other place, like off Cape Ann or in space or something? No. It's the karma that forces you to see a world that you're purifying by your own actions and deeds. Because that's the only world that you can experience for you. The world you're experiencing is not the world I'm experiencing. Or the world, we can only experience it from our own perspectival and our own karmic vantage point, right? But all the things I'm seeing, I can rewire the karmic mechanism. Right? That's how it works, I think. It also lets us know how we can continue the momentum of our miraculous life. Remember back there we said, remember, this is an amazing life you have. That's how you continue it. You don't just let it run out and squander it by making it profane and meaningless and not useful and not unmagical. Because you have a choice, see? If you want it to be bland, fine. But let it be magical for a while, because we've done the other thing for so long. Let it be magical and revel in it. So here's the couch potato contemplation on causality. Last meditation we'll give you. Spend a little time, some of your meditation sessions on the couch, doing an analysis on how causality could be working. You go to work now. You go do the work till next week. Examine how easy it is for you to bail out when it's uncomfortable for you to take responsibility. That you want to hide, you want to pull the covers up over your head, and then look for some specific examples about how you've done this, not academic examples or Wang Wu's book examples, your examples in your world, how you've done it. And then try to look into what the real causes for things like longevity, wealth, happiness could be. And begin to find the correlations, the causes that you could put into place for that. Start to connect the dot. You know the connect the dot word games? Do the connect the dots now. Try to do it in a logical way. I mean, one clue I gave you is if Jillian says something sweet to me and I yell at her, the cause of my yelling at her isn't from the good thing she did, and she will reap the benefit of the kind thing that she said. Right? They're not connected. So start to unconnect the connections you were making and say, well, where could they be coming from? And if likes are attracting likes, and it's fun. It's like knitting. It's like unraveling the sweater and then you kind of knit it in a proper way. And then lastly, last practice point here. Okay, practice, that's what this is about. Be a good gardener. Last thing, go out here and be a good gardener. it's really easy. I love this metaphor because my wife is actually an amazing gardener. Our little garden in our house this year is just so wonderful, and now I'm infected with it. I was out with the push mower this morning and watering everything so that it looks nice as an offering, for everyone. And so in this case, garden armed with a basic understanding of karma. I mean, you know it. We'll go into it next week for those who don't. But the fact that things couldn't be happening out there, they're coming from you, and as a result of your past actions and causes. So armed with that, become a good gardener, putting causes into place and trying to weed out the garden for the things you don't want. Putting the causes into place for the things you do, and then weeding it out by mindfully putting those causes into place. So if you need money, if you're strapped for money, you think between now and next week, we'll talk about it, what you think you need to do. If you're not feeling so great, think about what you need to do. If you're not feeling so happy, think about what you need to do. So your exercise is to find your big karmic rut, the biggest problem in your life, and do some karmic editing. How is this movie put together for you? Where were the splices made? Look at the biggest problem, and how did it come to you? What do you think some past causes that you can identify might be bringing this to you? Be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself, because who else are you going to be honest with? It's not worth it to try to fool yourself, because you can't do it. Again, it's a show game. So find your big karmic rut, and think about what you might need to do to fix that, and then go to work on that thing. Do something specific, each day. Find the thing, put a spotlight on it, ferret it out, think of where you think it might have been coming from, and then each day do one thing. I don't care how small or piddling you think it is. You do that one thing, and then you keep a notebook, and you do this for a month, and then check in with yourself, right, and see how it's going. And remember, mind the gap, right? The cause and the effect don't happen simultaneously, or else it could be a cause and effect if it was simultaneous. There's a gap. Mind the gap, okay? And then take a notebook and do a journal. Do this stuff. Do this stuff, and see what's going on, and see how it works, and share it with your friends, but mostly, keep track of it. And I swear, you'll be amazed. If you haven't been doing it, you will be amazed at what you'll find. So next week we're going to talk about going back and rewiring the past and gardening for the future, and we'll talk about some things you can do each day. Because that's all been a ruse to get you in here to talk about the book anyway. We all know that, right? Okay. So thank you. I went 5 minutes late, I'm sorry. But thank you very much for the incredible privilege to be able to go through my teacher's book again and try to teach myself something that I could help share with you. And just try it. He spent a lot of time writing it, and he put a lot of thought into it. And he's mastered a lot of these things. See? So go ahead and try it out, and I think you'll be happy. Okay, that's all. Go be cool. You're already cool, but literally cool. And I want to thank my son for coming to visit me and hanging out in my class.